Phumlani Emma Josie, the author of Lessons from Past Heroes. It's awesome to be back on the show this week to discuss the most important political and economic matters. And joining me is John Endres. He is the CEO of the Institute of Race Relations. John is a famous man. He's always in the media. He says what he thinks. I like him for that. John, am I describing you right? That you are a man who tells it as it is, no fear, no favor.
I should like to think so, Phumlani. Thank you very much for inviting me. And as for claims of my fame, I think they're wildly overstated. But I'm sure that appearing on your platform will contribute to my future fame and celebrity status.
Your
So thank
thing.
you for
No,
that.
no. I mean, you've been doing wonderful job yourself and the institute. John, let's talk about the big story at the moment. Let's start with that, and then we'll jump into our conversation on South Africa's inequality and how we deal with it, because it seems to be a concern to other people. But let's start with the U.S.-South Africa relations, right? I watched the press this week on Monday, the media briefing by our Minister of Foreign Affairs, Foreign Minister, the Dweko Minister, Ronald Lamula, as well as Paxtao, the Minister of Trade and Industry. I was very much disappointed, John. By the end of the briefing, I was upset as a citizen. I was, you know, frustrated because the way Lamula, especially Lamula, the way he was speaking, his view was that, all these things that the US is concerned about our domestic policies, whether it's in black economic empowerment, whether it's in expropriation laws, or in foreign policy, our relations with Iran, and so on. He says it's all conspiracy theories, that it's not part of the negotiations, it's not part of what is being spoken about, and therefore to them, it's not something that is of concern. Can you please explain that to me and to my audience here as to why is Lamula, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, saying this?
Well, I think one explanation for this is that they're getting their excuses in
Mm,
because they have failed in their duties.
mm,
The international relations minister has failed to thaw the frozen relationship between South Africa and the United States. And the trade and industry minister has failed to get good terms for South African business to get access to the American market or protect that access that used to exist in the past. And in the face of failure, you can own up to it and maybe explain how you're going to get out of the situation, or you can redirect blame and find other people to blame for it, downplay the significance of what has happened. And I think this is very much the strategy that these ministers have chosen. We also saw the text of a speech by BC Jonas published recently, where he also spoke about international relations and especially the South African relationship with the United States.
yeah.
And of course, Mr. Jonas is the designated special envoy of President Ramaphosa to the United States, who's not been accepted there.
And
He's not
as I've
traveled
heard,
to
he
the United
hasn't set his foot there, John.
Yes,
Until now.
since being appointed, he's
Yeah.
not set his foot there.
Mm.
Yes, as it has emerged. So he's also failed so far to deliver what he set out to deliver. And he similarly is trying to downplay the significance of a bad relationship with the United States and sort of contextualizes it in the shift in world affairs towards the East. And I think that's a classic example of misdirection and of making excuses for failure. I don't think it would be that difficult for the United States, for the South Africa, to improve its relationship with the United States. What is required is pretty clear, but there is a very deep unwillingness on the side of our government to engage or entertain any of the American demands.
Mm-mm. Business Day this week on Monday, they wrote a good editorial, in my view, about this issue. And in that editorial, they wrote, what's the title of the editorial? It's called Our Negotiators Misread or Misread the Room, I believe. And I posted this on my X account. And I said it's an excellent editorial. And then I quoted them and said, quote, Trump wants US companies to be exempted from BE, land expropriation without compensation to be scrapped, and the banning of the kill the Boer chant. Unquote. That was what Business Day wrote on Monday. So they understand that these are the issues that Trump is concerned about. Um, and there are many people, including yourselves. We have been speaking about this a lot. I've been speaking about it. Many people out there speaking about this in the U.S. John, in the conservative media. You see U.S. politicians, you see U.S. political commentators, the U.S. intelligentsia. They are pointing to these things that South Africa's pro-Iran stance is not something that is good for America. That are race-based policies, they are not good for American investments and for South Africa as well, at least in their view. You have Elon Musk, who has been punching very hard over the past months, saying that the race-based policies, this black economic empowerment, it's not doesn't have a place in 2025. Yet they are ignoring all of this and going on by and not taking accountability. What should we make
Mm.
of this as citizens?
So I believe that it is not necessary for the government to make full concessions on all American demands because
Yeah,
it's understandable that they don't want to, right? It's sort of embarrassing to have to bow down to the demands of another power. You don't want to do that.
another
You want to
state.
maintain
True.
your
Yeah, yeah.
sovereignty. But I think you can at least recognize your counterpart's concerns and offer some concessions that go part of the way towards addressing those concerns. And one example here would be that, President Ramaphosa is not going to ban the Kill the Boer song, and nor should he, because he says, our courts have pronounced on this, and they say that freedom of speech is upheld in South Africa, and so people should be allowed to sing the song. But that does not prevent him from condemning it, and that would be a gesture that he could take quite easily. He could say, our courts have decided this, we respect the court's judgment. However, we do not believe that this song is conducive to reconciliation in South Africa or helpful in improving our trade relationship with other countries. And therefore, from the presidency, from the government, we urge political parties not to use that song and to refrain from singing it. And that would already represent a way of addressing American concerns. And similarly on BEE, the maximum demand could be scrap all BEE, all race-based laws, which is something that the IRR would endorse. But that's not what the government has to do. All they have to do is say, okay, well, let's find some concession that shows that we're aware that this matters to the United States. For example, we could exempt American companies from BEE, or we could have a values-based exemption where we say all investments over 500 million rand are exempt from BEE. Or we could have a time-based exemption. We could say for a period of 3 years, any incoming American investment is exempt from BEE. So be
Mm,
creative, So you're showing that you're thinking about what the other side wants, and you're
yeah,
offering something in return, even if it's not everything that they're asking for, which is probably also not what they're expecting. At the
yeah,
same time, what we're also hearing is that the Americans feel that our negotiating stance has been unambitious. So we haven't really, come to the table with a grand, ambitious vision of what the relationship can be, or where South Africa wants to position itself. We've
mm,
been very much limited in terms of the offers and the demands, the asks that we've made. Now, we've talked about phytosanitary regulations and about off-season import permits, which is all, it's fine, but it's not very exciting. It's not very inspiring. And I think,
mm,
the Americans would respond much better to an ambitious offer and saying, we want to secure $100 billion of US investment in our energy infrastructure within the next 5 years. We want to, you know, um, have infrastructure investment. We want our power grid to be upgraded. We want support in upgrading our coal-fired power plants to get cheap power so we can get the economy growing.
yeah,
Show some vision, show some inspiration. Be interesting. Don't be boring. And I think
yeah.
so far
Show
we've been
something
boring.
new. Yeah, that you
Yes,
want
show
to.
something new.
Yeah,
And by all means, ask for things which are slightly outrageous, because we're dealing with an administration on the other side of the Atlantic in Washington that is used to doing outrageous things. They think big and they think outrageous things. They
yeah,
don't always do all of what they say, and that's fine. nor do we. But
No
let's go
state
in
does
there.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But let's go
Mm.
in there with big asks and let's be interesting. Let's stand out from the crowd, from the other, 150, 190 countries in the world that are all queuing up in a line in Washington, trying to get time with the administration. If you want to get that time, if you want to get that attention, you've got to be interesting. You can't be boring. And we've been boring so far. So
We've
we've
been
made no
boring so far.
concessions. Yeah,
Mm.
we haven't made any concessions. We've not recognized American concerns. We've not made interesting offers. And so we're at the back of the queue. We are not particularly interesting to the United States now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I'm not sure why they are, ignoring our leaders, ignoring the executive order that Trump signed. Because it highlighted those things,
Mm.
as to why he was cutting aid, why he thought that South Africa is, he said, taking a pro-Iran stance on the global stage. Those things were there in the executive order of Mr.
Yeah, and
Trump, I
you can
believe.
kind of it's
Yeah.
uncomfortable for our government to recognize these issues because they cut very close to the heart of ANC ideology and priorities. So
Mm.
it's not comfortable having to recognize those things, but there's
Those
probably no
things, yeah.
way past that. If you don't do that, you're not going to get very far. So it has to be acknowledged, addressed in some form
Yeah.
if we want to make any progress.
Yeah. So where do you see, do you think our relations will improve this year, next year, given the situation? Do you see it? Do you see the ANC adjusting and saying,
Mm.
look, I mean, we understand your concerns. Let's start talking about them. Well, it seems like these concerns,
Yeah.
they're not being discussed.
Yeah, so I think you frame that quite correctly. So some people might say, do you think that the relationship will improve while Trump remains in office? And I think that's kind of the wrong perspective. The right
Mm,
perspective is, will the relationship improve while the ANC remains in office and
mm,
doesn't change its stance? That's actually
mm.
the key question. I think
Yeah,
the relationship is very much open to being improved. That ball is entirely in our court. It is up to us as a country, our government, what they make of this possibility, this opportunity. And the opportunity is a big one because South Africa, despite being a relatively minor player in world affairs, has grabbed the attention of Washington, right? So that the president is talking about South Africa. The establishment is aware of us as a country.
they're
We're not like,
watching us closely. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So we should actually be leveraging this attention and saying, how can we maximize the results we can get from being noticed in Washington? And that is absolutely possible. Is the ANC going to do this? That's at the moment the answer is probably no,
Mm,
but I think it might be changed based on political pressures. No, so we do see the ANC in a state of weakness at the moment across multiple dimensions. It is still holding on to its core policies, but it's doing so. I think its grip is loosening because its grip on political power is also loosening. And
mm.
that might be the factor that ultimately drives change and leads to some reconsideration of our relationship with Washington. It may also be, once the job losses start hitting, the tariffs kick in on tomorrow, on the 7th of August. Once those retrenchment letters start going out in the car factories in the Eastern Cape, in the citrus farms, the pressure is going to increase on the ANC to do something about this. And I think what they've proposed doing so far doesn't go far enough, which is to establish an export desk and
Yeah.
maybe find some subsidies for affected businesses. That really is a stopgap measure. It's not going to solve the problem.
Yeah, yeah. Now, John, let's talk about inequality. You wrote a very interesting letter published yesterday, actually, on Business Day. Uh, and this you are saying in this letter, you are saying that that a small group of politically connected individuals became dollar millionaires through racial preferment is not a mark of success, right? That's what you are saying. You are criticizing BE here, um, and you write that this is the third paragraph. You are saying, is this the third? Yeah, you are saying that BE has delivered fake transformation. It has not broadened opportunity, lifted the poor, or grown the economy. It has done the opposite. Since 1994, unemployment has worsened, especially among Black South Africans. Inequality remains among the highest in the world. Millions are trapped in poverty and depend on welfare. Growth has flatlined. BE has been, the proponents of BE, John, say that we need the policy to reduce inequality in the country, to address, the injustices of the past. You still have an economy that is controlled by white people. And because it is controlled by white people, we do need transformation. I argued with Khanki Matabane on Mike Shem's show not long time ago on this subject of BE. Hanke is the CEO of the Black Business Council, John, and he was saying we need BE because the economy is still controlled by the white minority. Um, Explain this to us as to why, firstly, why inequality is it an issue? Is it not an issue? And is BE the right way, as its proponents think that it's the way to address the inequality in South Africa?
Yeah, this is quite a complex topic in South Africa, because of
Mm,
our history and because of the history of apartheid and the sort of the racial divisions that were created and that still exist to the present day. That makes the whole debate quite contentious, and I think it's a good idea to split out those two things. So
yeah.
let's talk about inequality first, per se, and then let's talk about racial disparities.
Mm,
So when our government speaks about key socioeconomic indicators that it wants to focus on through its policies, it often mentions the evil triplets. And the evil triplets are poverty, unemployment, and inequality. And these three things are put at the same level in public communication. I
mm,
think that is a mistake. I think that there's a difference between those three, and there's a hierarchy. There's an order of priority amongst those three things.
mm,
And inequality is the least important of those three things. The most important things are poverty and joblessness that go hand in hand. So if you want to improve the situation of South Africans overall, those are the two things you most need to focus on. You can actually afford to ignore inequality for the time being because you need to address poverty and joblessness first. When I think about inequality in South Africa, I'm often reminded of a very good insight that one of our writers on the Daily Friend had, Sindile Babaza, who pointed out that in South Africa, wealth is deracialized, but poverty remains racialized. And you see that in the statistics, but you also see it in your personal life. So
mm,
if you ever, take a flight from Johannesburg to Cape Town and you look around you on the plane, you'll see that there's black people and white people and Indian people and colored people. It's
mm.
very much, reflective of the Rainbow Nation. And the reason for that is that everybody that you see on that plane is wealthy by relative standards. Everybody's got enough money to buy a plane ticket.
Well, I'm not wealthy. I've been in a flight to Cape Town, but I'm not wealthy.
Yes, I'm sort of I'm exaggerating slightly
Yeah,
for
yeah,
for
yeah, yeah,
effect.
yeah. No, but I get your point. Yeah.
Exactly. But
Mm,
there's many people in South Africa, most of whom are black, who are not in that position. They will never be able to afford a plane ticket,
mm,
and their situation is often very desperate. And those are actually the people that our attention in terms of public policy should be focusing on. It
mm,
should not be the Saki Makozomas who I wrote about in that letter in Business Day, or the Cyril Ramaphosa's, or the Patrice Motsepes, or the bosses of the Black Business Council, all of whom are wealthy and have benefited from racial preferment policies like BEE, and so naturally defend those policies. But what they are not doing, and which I think is indefensible, is that through their communication, they're making us look away from the 85% of the black population who are not benefiting from BEE, and worse than that, are being negatively impacted by BEE. So BEE as a restraint on growth in South Africa, as a restraint on service delivery, as a restraint on government performance, is affecting poor black people the most. Think about this. If you're middle class in South Africa, you might have a private security service, so you don't have to rely on the police, which doesn't work very well. You've got your whatever security company looking after you. If you're well off enough in South Africa, if you're middle class, You don't go to a state hospital, you've got private medical aid, and you go to a private clinic. If you're middle class, you send your kids to a private school, maybe not to a state school.
Mm.
If you're middle class or well enough off, you've got solar panels on your roof, you don't depend on Eskom or City Power here in Johannesburg. Maybe you put a borehole in your garden or you've got water tanks, so you're not dependent on the municipality. And all of these are things you can only do if you're earning enough money to pay for them,
Yeah,
which
we can
most
afford
people
them. Yeah.
can't. Exactly. Whereas if you're living, in an illegal or sorry, in an informal settlement somewhere, and you're fully dependent on state services. Like the only services you can use are public schools, public hospitals, the police to keep you safe, which it doesn't do very well, and you are subjected to widespread failure in public service delivery, which is linked to racial preferment policies. And that is why we think that those policies are actually really, really harmful. It is time for them to be scrapped and for us to focus on producing high levels of economic growth, which is the only thing that can address poverty and joblessness. And it may increase or decrease inequality, but that actually doesn't matter so much. We really have to address poverty and joblessness as a primary focus.
Yeah, because you write in your letter that real transformation will come not from entrenching racial preferment, but from creating the conditions for an inclusive growth. These would be high fixed investment, rising productivity, plummeting, unemployment, and expanding opportunity. Right
Yes.
now, I think, John, at one point I spoke to you about this. I think we were speaking on a phone call, and I said one of the things I've observed in my lifetime, in my experience um, uh, as a professional, having worked in banking, and yeah, mostly I've worked in banking. So I have many of my peers, right? These are guys like me. These sort of a youngish middle class, who drive
Mm.
these nice cars, and we stay in these nice complexes, and we are doing well there. We're doing well in, you know, um, at our jobs. When I engaged them, John, I'm talking about these are black guys now, black guys like me. I sensed a lot of support for these policies. Yes, we are
Mm.
saying people like Makozoma, Cyril Ramaphosa, these are rich guys, they will support this. But I've noticed that there is the black middle class, at least in my experience, that I have encountered, dealt with, that is very much in support of these
Mm.
policies are shown. And many of them, they would go as far as saying we even need expropriation of land, without compensation. We need the expropriation laws, right? They must be race-based. Um, we need land. We want land. We don't have land. So much of this leftist view of South Africa and how we should address our problems. And these are people, basically who are in the middle class that I have encountered,
Mm.
And is there, what are your thoughts on the not the rich black people, but just the black middle class in general that supports these policies? And what is your response to my experience as to what I
Mm.
have encountered? Because it could not be just that's an anecdote. Maybe if one were to
Mm.
look into the data to show, what I have. What I have experienced, where you have this black middle class, educated at Wits, UCT, Stellenbosch, and
Mm.
so on, very much in support of these of such policies like BE.
Yeah. So I mean, this is something that in Indian law or Indian commentary is referred to as the creamy layer.
Yeah.
So in other words, you've got a segment of society that includes you and your peers who've benefited from good education and who have every resource available to them to be successful in the world. And
Mm.
the lie that has been sold to them is that had it not been for laws, especially favoring them over other race groups, they could not have made it. And I think that is,
Mm.
that is a statement that needs checking. So in other words, like, is it true that you, Phumlani, with your education, with your eloquence, with your polished presentation, would have been a failure in life if there'd not been laws in place forcing companies to hire people like you? And
mm,
that on the face of it seems implausible, because companies are looking for good people all the time. They're looking for people who can make a contribution to the company, make a contribution to the bottom line, who've got, good education, who can speak well, who can write well, who can present thoughts well.
yeah.
Companies want people like that. And they want people like that not only because they make a contribution to the company itself, but also because in the South African context, they know that they need to be hiring the best people from across all race groups. They cannot afford to exclude a race group. And that is the notion underlying BEE, for example. The notion is that, there's a white person sitting in a company somewhere who's acting as a gatekeeper, protecting this precious resource of jobs and refusing to give black people access to that resource. That's sort of the underlying philosophy. And that's really crazy. That is a crazy idea because, that's not how company decision making works. It's focused on profit maximization, on company growth, on making the company successful. And if you're a proper capitalist, you're not going to sacrifice your profit opportunities to your racial preferences. Maybe that happened in the past. Maybe it happens very occasionally now, but
Mm.
that is not how business works. Capitalists are out to make a profit. They're not going to say, I'm going to miss out on a profit because I don't like black people. So let me rather
But
not
John,
hire this people.
we have
Yes.
at least 80% of our society. It's black people. It's a massive amount of people.
Yeah,
Why would you, as John
exactly.
Endres, a white black, sorry, a white business owner saying, I don't want that market because it's black.
Yes,
Surely you would want to tap
exactly.
into that market. You would want the skills and the people who understand that market
Yes,
better, who speak the language for that market, right?
yes,
You'd
absolutely.
want that.
And you can actually see that in the numbers as well, because even before BEE was introduced, already companies were massively ramping up employing black people. Now, that even
Mm,
happened during apartheid, where pressure came out of business saying, we haven't got enough skills, we haven't got enough resources. If you limit us to only hiring white people, we're not going to make it. We need to hire black people. And you could see the apartheid laws being softened over time and more black people being hired into positions of authority in companies towards the end of apartheid. And you could see this transition accelerating after apartheid ended. So that process was already well underway by the time the BE laws were passed. And so this is why we talk about fake transformation, because it's creating this notion that as a black person, you're not going to make it if you don't have the government forcing companies to give you preference. So we reckon companies will be hiring black people anyway, even without BEE. And so they should, they should be looking at what works for them. They should be hiring the best person for the job, the best fit for the position, and that is what they're going to do, even without BEE laws to force them.
mm, mm. According to the proponents of BE, and I've seen this online because I'm very much active on X, and there's a lot of nasty stuff there that gets posted in
Mm,
reply to my political economic commentary. There's this notion, John, which we've already sort of touched on it. The notion that Phumlani Majosi, if it wasn't for these race-based policies, even though he did very well at Rhodes University, graduated top amongst the top students in his class, did well at UCT, graduated you know, um, amongst the top students in his class again. Even though he has all those qualifications, he would be working somewhere at McDonald's or KFC, I don't know, pushing some trolley somewhere with my qualifications. I would be doing that if it wasn't for these policies. That's what people tend to say. That, well, we are where you are because of these policies. If it weren't for that, you wouldn't be where you are, right? Which is totally misleading and very wrong and very destructive because even during the apartheid times, John, black people who had, yes, it was second, third class education, but black people who were professionals, right, in certain fields, they would get those jobs as per what they are qualified in, right? No, you would struggle. I mean, here's a person who's qualified in XYZ, but then maybe qualified in accounting or something, and he works at I don't know, KFC or pushing trolleys at a mall. That was not even happening. So even then, if you're a professional and you have education and you are educated, you will still go to work at a place where, and do better than those who are not educated. It's always been like that. So what would stop us now in a democratic society? That to me has never made sense, that argument at all.
Yeah. And I mean, the statistics bear that out. So if you look at employment rates by level of education, you'll see that unemployment is lowest amongst people with the highest education across all race groups.
Absolutely
And so,
correct. That's yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Same
And
that too.
sometimes you will see posts, for example, a chemical engineer with good marks can't find a job. And that certainly is true. Like,
Of course, it
not
happens, John.
everybody.
Yeah, we are not saying it's a
It does
perfect
happen,
labor
yes.
market. Yeah.
Exactly. But like the people, striving to enter into university in South Africa, I think are behaving completely rationally in the face of the fact that with a higher education, you've got much better chances of getting a job. And so that's basically what we should be doing. Also going back to Sindile Vabaza's earlier the comment about the deracialization of wealth.
Mm.
If you want South Africa to have lots of social cohesion, if you want to overcome the divisions of the past, the way to do it is to have lots of wealthy people, because then you'll have lots of deracialized society.
Yeah.
So that's actually what we need to be working on. And just looking at some of these statistics, sort of if you look at households by class, and this is information from 2017, so it's a little bit old, but you look at what proportion of the income classes is made up by black people. Chronically poor people, 94.4% of them are black.
Mm.
So 94.4% of chronically poor people are black. And that means people who fall below the national poverty line and have below average chances of getting out of poverty. That is what we need to be focusing on.
Yeah.
If we look at the middle class, we see that in 2017, 66.2% of those middle class people were black and 20% were white.
Mm.
And the measure here for middle class was it's people who are able to maintain a non-poor standard of living, even in the event of a negative shock. So maybe got a little bit of savings, got some assets,
Yeah.
got some resources to rely on. Then you're in the middle class. And even
Mm.
back in 2017, that was 66.2% of the black population. And that is, that's what we want. We want more people to be in the middle class section of the population,
Yeah.
or elite, which is another category here. And that is going to be the one thing that transforms South Africa in the way that we want to see it transformed
Yes.
into, a prospering society that advances and that expands the horizons of opportunity for everyone. Because if you're stuck in a chronically poor state, you haven't got options. There's almost nothing you can choose
Yeah.
in
There's
your life.
nothing. There's nothing.
No,
There's nothing. And I
you're
people
struggling for
think,
survival. Yeah,
yeah.
but like if you're wealthy, you can choose where to go on holiday. You can choose which car to buy. You can choose which clothes you like. You can choose to go to a restaurant. You've got so many choices of things to do. And that is sort of the opportunity that having money gives you. If you don't have that, you're very limited. There's not many things you can choose to do. And so that is what we need to address. That's what we're focused on at the IRR with our What SA Can Be campaign and with our Blueprint for Growth papers. We want the economy to grow fast so that 94% of the chronically poor are not black and that the chronically poor population shrinks. We don't want to have chronically poor people in South Africa. We want everybody to have an opportunity in life, to have a higher income and to have choices in how they live their lives.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's a quick question now as we close off with 5 minutes. The government of national unity. Can the government of national unity bring sense right now? You've been at least according to me, listening to you, you have been saying the right stuff. Um, I agree with you. Um, if you were to tell this, and I'm sure you do speak to the GNU politicians, and when you tell them to do what you've been telling us now on this show, um, what do they say? And do you think they are going to do it during this GNU kind of the government that we have now? Are we going to see BE being relaxed, suppressed, or scrapped? Scrapped?
Mhm.
Are we going to see race-based laws being removed or relaxed in the country under this GNU?
So that, I mean, that's like the key question that we are trying to understand. And
Yeah.
our read of the situation currently is that there's no signs of the ANC letting go of its core ideological values, which are race-based laws, for example, state intervention, straight redistribution, and a very limited understanding of what makes economies grow. So, under current circumstances, I would say no, we're not going to see any of that. We've seen the ANC hold onto power within the GNU, despite only being a 40% party and not being willing to let go of any of the tenets of the National Democratic Revolution. However, if we sort of fast forward a few years, the ANC is now faced with a bending or breaking choice.
Mm.
So the ANC, if it continues along the current path of no
Yeah.
growth, stagnant hope, it's going to break. It's going to lose elections, it's going to plummet in electoral support. It has the choice of bending, which means to relax some of its strict ideological beliefs to pursue economic growth, in which case it has a chance of survival. But that choice lies with the ANC. It has to choose to adapt to new situation, or it can choose not to adapt, but then it is going to die. It's going to collapse. And that is ultimately the choice facing it.
Yeah. John, my um, view has been that if we want to see a new chapter in South Africa, if we want to see and feel and live the new chapter in the country, I think we will need to have a weaker ANC that is out of power, right? Because then even the debate shifts, right? Because you can see they are still stuck on that we
Mm,
liberated you, since 1994, we've built
mm,
X amount of, free housing, um, X amount of people are in social grants, this is the amount of welfare we've provided to Black people. I just feel like
mm.
if they were to be out of the political center, right? Out of power, basically, and be on the benches. I think it will help us a lot because it would shift the conversation into
It
something.
depends on who replaces them,
Yeah, of course,
Phumlani,
it depends.
right?
But I'm just
Because
saying that's a
it
very,
could be
very
worse.
important point to make. Yeah.
Yes. It could be worse than what we've got now. So,
Could
I
be
mean,
worse.
that's
Yeah,
the
it could be
risk.
worse. But my point is that if we were to, I'm talking about in a scenario where a party like the DA, that is sort of center left, right? Because it comes with
Mhm.
different ideas, it would shift the debate. And
Yeah.
if that were to be the scenario, I think that's where we would make South Africa would really be moving forward. I believe.
Yeah. And
Was
and to give
yeah.
you a bit of hope there, Phumlani, so from our polling, we see that most South Africans are quite moderate, and they are probably more likely to support in elections parties that are centrist than parties that
Mm.
are radical. And that, that gives us a bit of hope for what lies ahead. The ANC, either bends or breaks. And what comes after, if we remain democratic and our elections remain free and fair, is probably going to reflect a moderate populace in South Africa.
Phumlani Majozi. Thank you so much, John. It's wonderful to talk to you, sir. A very insightful conversation. Yeah, so keep doing the work we are doing. Keep making a positive impact in South Africa. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you very much, Phumlani.
Anytime. It's Phumlani Majozi. This is the Phumlani Majozi Show. Remember to subscribe to this show and to follow me on X at Phumlani Majozi. I'm on LinkedIn as well, Phumlani Majozi. I'm on Instagram at Phumlani Majozi. I'm on Facebook, Phumlani Majozi, and I'm on TikTok as Phumlani Majozi. We'll chat soon.